Hello friends, this is Music Man from his man cave, and today I'm going to talk to you about recognizing a con, the con artist, when it's a con, and how you know it's a con, for sure. Coming right at you. Recognizing a con. Well, let me tell you how you do this. Recognize a con. Okay? I told you, I've been stupid with money. And the reason I was stupid with money is because someone was explaining to me, like when I was taking out a loan or using a credit card and reading all that small print, there's always lots of reading to do. And that's always, that right there points pretty much that it's a con. And there's all these little angles and fees and things and so forth, and you can't really even, you'd have to have a PhD, or I don't even think someone with a PhD could understand it all. But let me tell you, when it's that complicated that you can hardly understand it, someone's trying to take your money. It's a con. Okay? One of the biggest cons I know, because I've been raised in the church, is the con of the tithe. How do I know it's a con? Well, first of all, it's very, very complicated. You ask 10 pastors all about the tithe, and all 10 of them will have a different answer. They can't answer it. And when they do answer it, they tell you scriptures to go to, and you go to those scriptures, and then you're really confused because you're not understanding how they're interpreting that to mean that you should tithe. Like, you ask somebody, where does it say that you should tithe for the New Testament church? And so you go to Matthew chapter 23, where Jesus scolds the Pharisee for doing his herbs and his, again, things growing from the ground. He did that right, but he didn't have love and mercy and justice in his heart and so forth, which are also under the law. So right there it says that tithe is under the law, and it says that he wasn't following the law of the heart. And so it's confusing. So Jesus is right there saying that the tithe is under the law. And according to New Testament teachings repeatedly, we're no longer under bondage to the law. We're under grace. So it gets really confusing. Then you go to the 1st and 2nd Corinthians, and Paul talks about giving and support, but he never ever mentions a tithe. Confusing, isn't it? And some of them go to Hebrews, and you read Hebrews, and it talks about back when Abraham gave money to Melchizedek, who was in Salem, which was a pagan country, and blah, 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 and nowhere there does it say the tithe. It's just not there. And at the end of it, that if you read it in its context, the end of it says, now Jesus has given us a better covenant. So what was all being said there? It's saying, here's all this about Melchizedek and the tithe and the law of the tithe and Abraham and who was the first tither, and you know what I mean? So the tithe is before the law. That's why we're supposed to follow it today. And on and on and on it goes. But confusing, because then it says Jesus brought a better covenant. Paul never commands you to tithe. Jesus never commands you to tithe. It's just not there. In that Hebrews chapter 7, it doesn't command you to tithe. It's just not there. You can't find it in the New Testament. It's not there. So where does this tithing come from? Well, you got to go back to the Levitical tithe. And you got to study all about the Levites and how they got 10% of what the people grew, the farmers grew. And then you got to study about the 3 times a year tithe for the festivals and bringing in their cattle to sell their cattle and that tithe. And then you got to also study about the tithe for the poor and welfare of that time and so forth. And so you're supposed to somehow make a connection between that and today's church. And then there was a time in Malachi chapter 2, verse 9, where Israel was neglecting their covenant, their tithe. And so you see how confusing it is? And then it says, would you rob from God? You're not giving the tithe. Tithes, actually plural. So the tithes is actually more than 10%. I don't know exactly what it was in Israel, but it was more than 10%. Somewhere close probably to 20 to 30%. And so that all spells out to me, after I've talked to pastor after pastor. In fact, One friend of mine, he talked to a pastor, and the pastor said, when you start pastoring a church one day, you'll discover why you teach the tithe. So in other words, what he's saying is, you can't trust people out of the love of their heart to give generously unto Jesus Christ and to support his church. Therefore, you need to create a law, a con job called the tithe, to force people to give at least 10%. Yet, only today, 17% of people in churches tithe. Well, that's because most people read the Bible and they're just like me. They get very, very confused. It's a con job. It's not accurate. And nobody's giving good information. The only information I know that's accurate is what Paul said, that we are to give not out of guilt, not out of compulsion, but we're supposed to give unto the church as there's need and from a loving heart for Jesus Christ. And we're to give cheerfully. That's simple. I can handle that. How much are we to give? However much you want. Not 10%. That's legalistic. That's a con. That's pastors desperate for their congregates to give them more money. That's sick. And that's wrong. The bottom line is you should be giving according to what God is impressing upon you in your heart to give. And if you can give it, give it. If you have to pay your bills and you can't give it, then you need to get into a position where you can generously give to the Lord. But I still say that tithing is the biggest con ever perpetuated. And people still today will stand on this and they will fight you to the bitter end about this con. Credit cards are a con. Weird loans, weird things they send in the mail with fees. Dish, DirecTV are a con. $29.99 and all of a sudden it's $40 and they tell you all these hidden fees I didn't read in the small print down there. So I put tithing right along with credit cards and everything else. It's just a con for people to stand behind a pulpit and use scare tactics on you and guilt on you and bondage on you to get you to give to the church. They don't need to do that. Trust the Holy Spirit. Let him do his work. It's absolute nonsense. It's garbage. And it's a waste. It's such a waste because it makes Jesus Christ look really bad. He doesn't need your money. Jesus doesn't need your money. Let's be honest. The church needs the money for the lights, for electricity, for those things. And God isn't impressed by you building a multi-million-dollar church. That's not impressive to him. Okay? So as there's need, from the heart, cheerfully, then you avoid the con of tithing. Credit cards, cut them up. They're a con. Someone sends you a bunch of checks in the mail for 25% interest. It's a con. They will get you, and they will hurt you, and you will be financially hurting. Someone tells you, you need to put into a 401k. The government will take care of you. Government can't take care of everybody. It's a con. It's a con. So the more complicated it is, the more you have to research it, the more you should realize it's probably a con. God bless. Talk to you later. I almost forgot one more thing. You're going to laugh at this one. Pat Robertson said on CBN, the 700 Club, that if you don't tithe 10% to your church, that God is going to remove the blessings from your life and you'll be under a curse. Where does he get that? From Malachi chapter 2, verse 9. Can you not see that that's a con? Why? He's saying that God is a God of bondage and fear, and he's got a big lightning bolt in the sky, and if you don't tithe, you're going to go to hell. Or something really horrible is going to happen to you. Well, really horrible things happen already to Christian people all the time. It has nothing to do with the tithe. One of my good friends, who's a Sunday school teacher, has just been diagnosed with bone cancer, and he's tithed all of his life. Sorry, Pat Robertson. Starting to stink.